And it's my pleasure to welcome Janie Haigh and Daniel Miller for the next stage of our proceedings. And I'm going to ask them to say a word about who they are and what they do, but I notice actually, Janie, that you have a new title. You are, or perhaps we got the old title wrong, but you're client manager and responsible for client management and housing performance. So welcome. Would you like to tell us what that all means?
Of course, yeah. I think I've actually stolen someone else's job title on the agenda. That was the issue with it. But so part of my role is to oversee the housing management teams in the North and the South. So they have their own head of management in North and South, but I manage the teams that make sure that they're delivering how they should be delivering, basically. So it's a contract management side. And then the other part of my role is to oversee the work that Daniel's done. And I hope, Tanisha, you're getting some sort of payment at the end for that. For all of that praise. So my role is two separate sides, really. So tonight it's here for the resident involvement side.
Hello everyone, and thank you for inviting me along tonight, and thank you to Tanisha and Marilyn for those kind words. Yes, my role, I started as resident involvement manager on the 5th of January of this year. It's worth pointing out that before January of this year, there wasn't really a dedicated resident involvement team. I came under the client management team that Janie's mentioned. And then since January, we've had a dedicated resident involvement team. And then since March, we've had a community engagement officer in post who's been working with TRAs, both existing and new groups of residents who want to form TRAs, and supporting them and giving them information and advice to do that. The role is incredibly varied and challenging, and we're offering involvement in a variety of ways. You might not want me to go into too much detail yet, because I might answer some of the questions. Okay.
Well, Janie and Daniel, I'm going to show the first question.
Okay, welcome both of you. This one's for Janie. I don't think you're the young hip one, but we'll come to Daniel later. Janie, could you, what we want to start out is kind of finding about the baseline. So what are the current opportunities that the council offers to residents for involvement? And in particular, sort of what levels? So in other words, what can residents influence and what can't they?
Okay, so there's a couple of things here. So the first bit I'll talk about is the sort of information sharing. So on an estate-based level, as we've already heard, we have the tenants and residents associations. And Daniel single-handedly, really, as a resident involvement team with Michelle, have been going out and engaging with TRAs and also with estates that don't have a TRA representative there, and trying to establish those new TRAs, which Daniel will probably go into in a bit. So you have the sort of estate-based involvement, and then we have a forum where a representative from each estate TRA will come together once a month to find out about the key issues within the landlord function, really. And there is a means to inform policy and to have a vote, really, on any decisions that are taken at those forums. We also have a borough forum, which all residents are invited to attend, chaired by Councillor Homan, and that's more really an information sharing mechanism, really. Alongside that, we have a policy and accountability committee, which is predominantly policy setting. So we have quite a few new strategies and policies that go through that forum. And again, all residents are able to attend that and to feedback on that side. So that's the sort of, the structure in itself. Alongside that, we're working with the TRAs to do a number of estate engagement days. So we're very conscious from what we've heard from residents that there are residents out there who haven't been engaged before, as Tanisha was saying. So we're trying to get out there and do some door knocking and talk to residents and find out what the key issues are and see if they're willing to set up a TRA in their area. And I know that Pinnacle in the south, for example, are doing a number of road shows, that sort of thing. So there's that estate-based level again. But what we are doing that's slightly different to what I think was happening before is we're creating new forums for decision making. So Daniel really has worked with residents to create a resident involvement structure, which we finalised a couple of months ago. But within that, there are a number of sort of quality assurance groups, which gives the power back to the residents really to decide, is the landlord function, are they providing what they should be providing? Are we happy with the service? What can we try and change? And as part of that, there's been the Repairs Working Group, which has been a long-standing group, very active, and their main focus is to look at the repairs and to scrutinise the repair role, which has been very powerful in itself, really. Alongside that, since Daniel's team was established, we've created a number of other groups. So there's a communication group, which I know Anthony's pushing on really, so we've had the initial meeting of that so far, very much resident-led. We've set up the investment group, which is looking at a number of investment options for estate-based activities. And again, a different number of residents that are joining that group itself. We have the reading group, which I know Tanisha's part of. Thank you, Tanisha, for your involvement in that. And we have the estate inspections as well, which residents are involved in. So there's a number of those groups that are starting to evolve based on what residents have asked for, really, which give a number of decision-making opportunities back to residents. We are, as Daniel said, an extremely small team. So there's Daniel and Michelle, a community engagement officer. But one of the things that we are doing is we're recruiting to hopefully 6 new posts within the resident involvement team. So we do hear, we're very passionate about trying to push forward with these initiatives, but we're just trying to get the hands on deck really to do so. And one of those roles is an inclusion officer. And I'm conscious that there are other groups that we're probably not tapping into at the moment, and that would be the role for that person when they're appointed.
And what's your aspiration there? Do you have a sort of vision of where you are going with residents, or where you want to be with resident involvement?
So I think at the moment we have a very influential core group of residents that have been involved for a long time, and what we're trying to do is to widen that out, really. So again, we're talking to TROs, we're talking to residents, trying to find out if they want to get involved. And I think, like Tanisha and Marilyn have said, it's about putting that offer, really, and making it clear to residents exactly how they can influence that. So in a perfect world, it would be all residents, all involved, all driving forward new initiatives and working with us together. So working with residents rather than two, as we may have done so in the past. It's trying to turn that around, really.
And just going back to that issue of the limits of resident, I mean, as Peter started out saying, there are many, many models of resident involvement, up to and including having residents at what would be the equivalent of cabinet level in the council, making decisions as opposed to influencing them. What's the limit in the current structure to what residents can actually make happen, as opposed to be consulted on or recommend?
Yeah, well, I think there's a capacity issue, really, from a resident's point of view. I know many of you are on the commission already, and that takes up quite a lot of your time. So again, it's about getting new people in and involved in that itself. And then I think it's probably maybe us being a bit clearer on the decisions that are taking place, and it's not just about housing as such, it's about bringing in the other sort of service areas as well, and do it as a cohesive approach from a council function, and make sure that residents are aware of the decisions that are being made, but also maybe focus groups, or I know we've got a key performance indicator working group that's been set up predominantly for residents to scrutinise the KPIs that we've already got there, and to tell us how they think we should be moving forward. So it is very much residents leading that decision.
Anything more, Shelley?
Hi, I was interested in the 6 new posts and what they entail, first of all.
Okay, so at the moment we have Daniel, superstar, and we have Michelle Samuel, who is working as a community engagement officer directly with TRAs. And I think initially we probably thought that one community engagement officer might suffice, but as we're finding, it's, she's completely stretched. And so we've asked for 2 more community engagement officers. One would be a temporary post, really to work directly with the sort of empowering TRAs and the support side directly to the TRAs with the grants, etc. We have the inclusion officer, as I mentioned. We're looking to appoint to a project officer to support all of the governance functions and the groups that we're trying to establish. And Daniel's old post, which is now the resident involvement and governance officer. So they would support Daniel directly in the establishment of these groups and the coordination of the groups and working with residents that way.
I'm just wondering if you concentrate on finding people who live within the borough as applicants for these posts.
Yeah. Well, we will consider anybody, to be totally honest, but we do obviously look for background knowledge of certain estates, and if they're aware of the key issues. We do have an apprentice on the team who lives in White City. She joined us recently, and the knowledge that she had, compared to people that aren't familiar with White City, is incredible. So she's listening to the approaches that we're coming up with and sort of saying, well, actually, I'm not sure that might work in White City. So it's something that we're definitely taking on board, yeah.
Also, if I can just quickly, in addition to that, the posts will be advertised to current housing officers, so who perhaps want to branch out and get into resident involvement full time, move away from their tenancy management or rent income roles. So, we could perhaps harness a lot of their years of knowledge and experience in the borough.
Yeah, I mean, it's half the battle, isn't it, having people who know the area very well.
Totally.
Including tenants,
yeah.
and I was wondering if the job's actually open for tenants as well.
Open, as Jane says, open to all jobs that are advertised on the council's website, and they're open to all.
Jenny, could I just go back to the question about what tenants can influence and what they can't? And this is more of I'm going to make a point from my vantage point here rather than a question. Of course, the Residents' Commission is there to decide on the future of council housing, and you can't really get more involved than that, can you? But my question, I suppose, and it's a rhetorical question, is what happens after that? So, does this mechanism that we've got, that the new administration has created to look at the strategic future, does it have an afterlife? In other words, once we've delivered our recommendation, does the model of the Commission live on in some way? But I just wanted to make that point.
I'm sure it does, Peter, yeah, to be honest, because there's so much knowledge on, that the Commission have gathered so far, and you probably know more of the landlord functions than Daniel and I do now from all the research that you've done. So maybe an advisory role, or I think it would need to be a specific function. We're trying to recruit to the scrutiny panel at the moment, which is drilling down onto certain landlord functions, and that might be something that Commission members may want to get involved in going forward. But I totally agree, we need to capture the knowledge and experience that the Commission have gathered over the last couple of months.
Can I just add to that as well? I think, Peter, even this knowledge and decision making existed before the Residents' Commission in terms of the Tenants' Conference project group. Residents were very heavily involved in all of the planning and organisation and the structure of the day. The groups who were invited, to present and have stalls on the day. So I think that model and the model of the Residents' Commission are the ones we've got to adopt for the future.
Daniel.
I thought I could pass it on.
I've got three questions for you,
Sure.
kind of interlocking. So if I ask them all together, perhaps you can answer them individually as they come
We'll
up.
see how my memory works. Yeah.
That's what I'm doing. What is the level of take-up of opportunities to get involved? Does take-up vary geographically or by things like age, length of tenancy, type of housing, ethnicity, etc.? And how representative of the resident population are those who get involved?
Well, I think the first part was then the level of take-up of those getting involved. I think really you've got to look at the different opportunities for involvement that we've got. It varies between those opportunities. So, as an example, we've got, as we've talked about, the recently agreed resident involvement structure. At the moment, the level of take-up there is low because it's generally been advertised to residents who are already involved and often heavily involved in a number of different ways, such as yourselves on the Residents' Commission or other groups that are already operating, like the Repairs Working Group, Sheltered Housing Forum, etc. So we recognise that we need to be publicising that structure more widely, and exactly linking into what Tanisha said, getting that message out there that there are ways that people can get involved and influence the way services are delivered and the way officers function even. We're doing that already. We're doing a series of 20 estate engagement events. We're about halfway through the programme, and we have attempted to engage with 500 different properties, residents from 500 different properties, and we've gained feedback, I would say, from about 10% of those 500 at these events. So moving on, that's in terms of the involvement structure. But then if you looked at TRAs and the local level representation, encouraging and supporting that, I've got some figures here in terms of that. We've got 32 registered TRAs in the borough, which represents about 48% of, which basically means 48% of housing stock residents are represented at a local level at the moment. My colleague Michelle, the Community Engagement Officer, has been working with other groups of residents, and there are 5 TRAs that have recently been formed, and it's just in addition to those 32, just to make clear. And it's a case of dotting the I's and crossing the T's in terms of registration and getting their agreed constitutions in place. There are a further 5 in the process of becoming established, so they haven't held their inaugural meeting and elected committee members yet. And there are another 9 potential leads for the establishment of TRAs. These have come from a mixture of sources, from the tenants and leasehold conferences that took place in March and May respectively, and also the estate engagement events that we've been carrying out. As I say, we're halfway through the programme there. Let me see where we're going now. So we're still on the first part about the level of engagement. So then, as Janie mentioned earlier, there's the monthly Housing Representatives Forum meeting, which up until very recently has been involving the already involved residents. And in the last couple of months, we've started to put invites out there to some of the groups who are newly forming, to try and get them to come along and see what it's all about, what one strand of involvement and decision making is all about. And we're having some success in getting some new members coming along. There is work to do. I think, again, back to Tanisha's point, getting the message out there is a key part of this, and I think we've got to look at the different mechanisms that we can do that. We are a small team, and even with the new recruitments, we'll still be as a team. So I think we've got to use social media such as Twitter or online discussion forums to greater effect, because not everyone wants to attend a meeting, in a physical sense. And also, as Marilyn touched on, there's the Sheltered Housing Forum that the resident involvement team have recently become involved in, working with and supporting. Up to that point, the support was mainly coming from the area housing team, and we weren't so involved in that. But there's a real opportunity there, because each of the 22 sheltered housing schemes have tenants' representatives. Slightly different from a TRA, where it's 1 representative generally, or 2 for a big scheme, to represent the scheme issues. And we're working to get a sort of guidance in place, so the role is clear and there's a clear and transparent election process for those members, and they understand the commitment they're taking on. Where are we? I think that might be the first one. Please remind me of the second 2 points, Anthony.
Well, yeah, I was going to come back to the second point, Daniel.
Okay, sure.
Which was regarding take-up geographically, things like age, length of tenancy, ethnicity, and so on.
Yes,
do you have any figures?
I have figures for the 32 registered TRAs. 18 of those are in the north of the borough and 14 are in the south of the borough. That's the first thing. And then of the 18 new potential TRAs that are in the various stages of forming or being leads to form, a further 9 are in the south and 9 are in the north. So it's an entirely equal split there. What I will say at this point, in terms of the other areas, age, ethnicity, disability, etc., it's an area that I feel as a housing department we are not so strong on capturing in terms of the data that we hold on our tenants and leaseholders and sheltered housing tenants as well. So in common with that, there's a lot of work for the resident involvement team to actually tap into and get, for a start, estate profiles, so we know who we're working with at an estate level. And then also, we have a lot of work to do to know who's in our gap sites, which are the smaller infill blocks, and the street properties as well, of which there are about 3,100. So I would say at this stage that it's an area that requires a lot of work that I will be focusing the inclusion officer's attention on greatly.
Thanks for that, Daniel. And I think we're very aware that in much of this resident engagement activity, we're at quite an early stage after quite a long period in which there has been an awful lot of commitment around that area. And you're obviously doing very well in terms of increasing the number of TRAs. But actually, it would be true to say at the moment that there is very little information about age, ethnicity, and length of tenure. As a matter of interest, have you any idea how many residents are actually involved in the 32 TRAs that you have up and running currently?
Well,
if you do a mail out, for example, how many would you mail out to?
Yes, in terms of a mail out for the 32 TRAs, we are mailing out in excess of 100 residents, based merely on the committee structure, which is chair, secretary, treasurer, and in a lot of cases vice chair. So that would be actually 128 if all TRAs have that full committee structure like that. At the moment, we don't engage more widely. I know a lot of TRAs have other registered committee members without specific roles. Exactly.
Can I just, I may as well get this in before going on to Lorna. Leaseholder involvement, the language has been somewhat about tenant involvement. What can you tell us about leaseholder involvement in these representative organisations?
Tenants are often heavily involved in the TRAs that we already work with. In fact, we have a number of TRAs that more or less entirely consist of leaseholders. Sorry, did I say the wrong thing? Yeah, leaseholders are heavily involved in TRAs alongside tenants. It is fair to say, in common with the sheltered housing side, where, as I said previously, it was being dealt with by just, I mean, the involvement was previously just coming from the housing team. A lot of leasehold involvement has also just come from the leasehold services team, so it's another area that beyond the communication with TRA committee members that we need to address. There are currently leasehold forums that take place on a quarterly basis, and it's fair to say because of the size of the resident involvement team, we haven't got too involved in that side of working with leaseholders. Yeah. Apart from the conference, as indeed Janie says, there was involvement from leaseholders in terms of workshops taking place about how they wanted their leasehold conference to be, agenda planning, structure of the day, etc.
Hello, Janie, this is a question for you. Daniel's described quite well what you try to do to engage residents in kind of activities as well. Have you got any plans to think about how you can boost resident involvement and maybe reach out to people who wouldn't normally, come to TRAs or get involved?
So what we're trying to do as part of the estate engagement days is we're targeting the estates that we haven't really engaged with before. And we're finding that when we talk to tenants and leaseholders, they're sort of saying, you never talked to us before, what you do now? So it's trying to build up that relationship with those residents that are there. And as part of that, in the data side that Daniel referred to before, we're trying to capture the contact details that the residents would like us to contact them at. And then we're going to add those to our housing database, so our iWorld database, so that we can run reports. So it's not just going through the TRA chair or the TRA reps, it's actually targeting anybody who said to us, yeah, we want to get involved, we want to find out a bit more about what's going on. So we can use that as a sort of comprehensive mail out, really, rather than just the existing contacts that we have there. And in terms of the excluded people, really, that's back to the inclusion officer that we're desperately trying to recruit to, really, and to work with the third sector better, because at the moment, there's only a small team, as I said, so trying to get out as much as we can, but I think it's looking at working with the third sector, maybe in a more constructive way, really.
I just wanted to ask about how you monitor resident involvement, and what ongoing support is offered?
Okay, so monitoring, so we monitor, for example, the emails that come into the Get Involved email accounts, make sure that we're responding in the right way. We're monitoring the numbers of people that we're engaging with at the estate engagement events, which again is part of a much bigger sort of data cleansing exercise, really, to make sure that we're gathering that information that we can. Sorry, Lorna, what was the second part of your question?
Just ongoing support for resident involvement.
Yeah.
What support do you offer at the moment?
Okay, so what we're trying to do is to start again really with the TRAs, because we found that, for example, we have a TRA grant and only a small proportion of TRAs have actually taken it up this year. So it's about working the community engagement officers really, and with Daniel's support we'll work directly with the TRAs to empower really and to offer training and mentoring where possible, and then hopefully that will then devolve down into all of the residents on the estate at the same time.
Thanks so much, Jenny and Daniel. The first question I think is my supplementary question is on the TRA grant. How much is set aside as a resource to support the TRA? That's question number one. Daniel, you did mention that only 48% TRAs are registered. What are you doing to ensure that other TRAs get on board? But I think first to deal with the TRA grant. Thank you.
What I'd like to say first was I don't have the exact figure to hand. I did issue a paper at the recent Housing Representatives Forum which had the projected TRA grants for each of the registered TRAs on it, which did have a total figure. I'd be happy to supply that to the Residents' Commission after this meeting. I don't, however, have an exact figure to hand, so if I was to estimate it, it's probably going to be incorrect at this time, I'm afraid.
Okay, maybe to help you out there, it was I think under 500 and the total grant was about under £40,000.
Most definitely under £40,000 for the total. It is proportional to the number of properties in the area that the TRA represents in terms of the grant amount that is payable. As a base level, any registered TRA would receive £400 a year, and then for TRAs who represent over 285 properties, it's £1, an additional £1.40 per property on top of the £400. I feel like Carol Vorderman here actually with that. Just picking up on your second point, Matthias, about the 48% that you mentioned.
Yes.
Apologies if that wasn't clear at first. It's not 48% of TRAs are registered. It's actually that the 32 registered TRAs represent 48% of dwellings or properties in the borough. Okay. If that makes sense. Is that clear?
Is it possible as a follow-up to provide the Commission with written evidence regarding how you are resourcing the TRA later on?
How we are sourcing?
As a follow-up, if you could get the relevant information and you pass it over to the Commission to find out the level of resource you are providing the TRA.
Absolutely, yes. We're happy to provide that after this public hearing, yes.
The second question goes to Jenny. Jenny, in terms of what success rate you are having, how do you gauge? Because according to the new mandate, the expectation is that residents, you are going to, whatever is being done, you are working with residents. You have talked about low numbers of the officers. How well are you using your housing officers and the infrastructure around the housing offices? Don't you think that would sort of complement what you are doing if you were effectively using your housing officers? Yes. The second part of the question on that, you have advertised for more posts. Has that been influenced by the feedback you have got from the residents that those sort of crucial areas you have identified is what the residents feel is missing. And the third one, this one third one.
Matthias, we had to have house rules on this, so strictly speaking, when I introduced the concept of supplementaries, I thought we would stick with parliamentary practice. You have one supplementary. I've given you two, but I think that'll have to be enough for the time being. Jamie?
Okay, so in terms of working with the housing officers, totally valid point, and it's something that we are pushing on at the moment. So back to the estate engagement days, Daniel and Michelle are identifying which estates with the housing officers and the housing managers and the housing teams, which ones we should target first. And then in the organisation behind those estate engagement days, Michelle in our team is working directly with the housing officer for that estate to make sure that they're doing the door knocking together, the leafleting together. So they're buddying up really to make sure that the housing officer knows who the residents are and it's part of their role. But Michelle's more linked in with the TRA specific. So the housing officer is responsible for the management of the estate really, whereas Michelle is more linking in and trying to empower the TRAs that are on the estate. So we are doing some joint up working there, yes. And your second question was?
My second question, I just want to find out whether the new posts you have advertised for are driven by the feedback from the residents about the missing link of the level of engagement.
So it's not really a straightforward answer, but the resident involvement and governance officer post is Daniel's old post, and I think anybody who's been involved for a while will know that we desperately need the old Daniel role to be filled because it's so heavily supporting of the meetings and the arrangements and the communication really between the officers and the residents. The two community engagement posts is back really to residents saying to us, we need to get more people involved, we need to get out there, we need to engage with more people. So that is predominantly their role. They're out on the estates most of the days talking to people. So that is a reaction to what residents have asked us to source, really.
No, I think we'll have to leave it there because I've already got a couple of bids for supplementaries, and I'm conscious that Kim has got a question and we're beginning to push up really against time, Matthias, on this occasion. So I'm going to go to Andy for a supplementary, then Peter Bevington, and then we come to Kim for the final question in this session.
Hello to you both. My question's very brief. You've mentioned that there's a grant for TRAs, but given the maths, it sounds like very few of them are actually taking it up. Why is that? Why wouldn't a TRA want to take funding that's available?
I think that breaks down into a number of factors actually. I think the first one I'll highlight is historical factors in terms of the past relationship that some residents and TRAs have had with the council. There was in the past a deterioration and a breakdown of that relationship, and residents felt that things were being done to them and that they didn't have a say and felt powerless in what was happening on their estates and to their homes. The next part of it is probably around governance. And actually how TRAs are run and the requirements that we ask for before TRA grants are payable. If I can just sort of outline those very briefly. We ask that an AGM, annual general meeting, is held yearly, and that a committee is elected, accountable individuals to be the chair, treasurer, secretary and vice chair, as I've outlined. And we ask that there's evidence of that meeting is provided to us in the form of AGM minutes or a section of the minutes that shows the election. We also ask that the TRA accounts are audited on an annual basis, and that those audited accounts have been provided to the AGM and approved by residents before the grant is payable. If TRAs run a hall, such as this one, we ask to see that the building is adequately insured for public liability, mainly. And so in some ways you could say that they are barriers, but in my view I feel that they are good governance and good practice that we ask for those.
Andy, do you want to press a bit more on that, on those answers?
Yeah, because given that the list that you've just said isn't really that challenging to my mind to complete, there's got to be more reason why TRAs wouldn't be getting money that by rights they're entitled to get.
Yeah, I mean, the other feedback we've had at the Housing Representatives Forums from some TRAs is that the amount of the grant is not worth applying for, is not worth sort of going for, even though in my mind it would certainly cover 1/4 of utility bills, at least as one way to spend it, for example.
So it almost sounds like one of the things that's blocking greater resident involvement is the TRAs themselves, particularly some that have had bad experience in the past with the council?
I would entirely agree with that, and I think that links into what we've talked about recruiting 2 further community engagement officer posts. Working with TRAs is about talking to people, and working with people is a slow process often, about gaining trust and, as we said, empowering people and giving them the skills and the knowledge to run their TRAs well, and to trust that what we say is for their benefit and to help them along, as opposed to catch them out. I think in the past there's been an element of, the council are snooping over how we're running our affairs. So I think there is further work for engagement officers.
I'm aware that other landlords in other places can do things like set up estate improvement funds, or a slab of money or a budget that residents' panels or TRAs or whoever it might be can then actually prioritise for spending, and others do things like invite residents to take part in procurement exercises. I just wondered kind of whether you're looking in those areas as well.
That does, if I may answer that first of all, that does already exist here. We've very recently had the first investment panel meeting, which will be looking at the minor estate improvement grants, which is indeed they're bids that are submitted by residents of the elected TRAs, or where there isn't a TRA, housing officers can make the bid, but in consultation with the residents on that estate. And it is for things to improve the general well-being and appearance of the estate, like, for example, bike racks or play equipment and things like that. So there is a budget. Residents can put the bids in, and more importantly, the investment panel consider those bids against a set of criteria and decide whether to allocate the funding across the work.
I've got to pass this over actually now to Kim for the final question in this session. Kim.
Thank you. This is for you, Daniel. We've talked a lot about estate-based TRAs, and you mentioned, I think, 3,100 street properties. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So could you just describe what options for involvement there are for residents in street properties?
Well, for a start, there's the resident involvement structure that we've talked quite a lot about. There's lots of ways they can get involved, such as the scrutiny panel or communications group. They're all open to all residents of the borough, and not just estate-based properties, and not just elected TRA representatives, for example. That's the clearest way they can get involved. I think the area that we recognise we have to do some work in is about involving them in local representation and giving street property residents and also gap site residents more of a voice and more of a way to champion issues in their area, as we already give estate-based property residents. One thing we're working on as a proposal is to have a mini conference for street property and gap site residents, so that we can get a better handle on understanding their concerns and their issues, and we can develop an offer that addresses that. The other way again is back to harnessing digital media, perhaps using online forums for those who are involved. As Jenny said, we've got the rent statements going out very soon to 12,500 tenants, and with that will be a Get Involved leaflet, which will outline to residents ways to get involved, and that will also go to street properties.
Ken, anything more on this question?
Just very briefly, we talked. Someone mentioned an organisation that did used to exist for street properties. Are there any thoughts of trying to resurrect that in any shape or form?
We're very keen to resurrect that, and we're very keen to work with any groups who approach us, who could perhaps be an umbrella body for street property residents and gap site residents. It'd be much easier, I think, given the dispersed nature of street properties and gap sites, to have an umbrella body that information can be disseminated between, and we can get that conversation going, really, Kim.
Peter, very quickly.
You mentioned the information going out. I just wanted to ask what you say to new tenants about resident involvement.
What we say to new tenants about resident involvement, I would need to get back to the Residents Commission on that, whether it's part of the sign-up pack. I know anecdotally, as a very recent example, a sheltered housing tenant signed up and the specialist housing officer was pushing that, but that's very anecdotally to say, publicising involvement there.
Well, Daniel, if you could get back to us
Certainly.
with that and any of the other specific items of data or information which you think it would be helpful, and we will follow this up having looked at the transcript of these proceedings. But I apologise for having to hurry us along
No
towards
problem.
the end there. But
We do talk a lot.
It's a fascinating and important topic, and people had loads of questions. But Jamie and Daniel, we're immensely grateful to you for being with us this evening and for the very comprehensive and helpful replies that you've given us, and also to thank you really for the terrific work that you're embarking on. It's a new initiative, it's a new world really, and we wish you the greatest of success. And in the meantime, we'd like to express our thanks to you in what has become the conventional fashion.